How do you feel? Not you, Charlie Rose, but don't you understand that the people who do this thing, who practice racism, are bereft? There is something distorted about the psyche. It's a huge waste, and it's a corruption and a distortion. It's a profound neurosis that nobody examines for what it is. It feels crazy. It is crazy.
Little Pecola thought that if she had blue eyes, she would look beautiful, she would be accepted by the society, her parents will fight no more, people will not ignore her, and she will live a better life. She prayed every single day to God to give her the blue eyes.
Somebody said, "Does God exist?" And I could get an answer, yes or no. I did that when I was 11. And the girl that I was talking to said, "He does exist." No, she said he doesn't exist. I said, "Yes, he does." She said, "No, he doesn't." And I said, "How do you know?" And she said, "Because I have been praying for blue eyes for 2 years. And he didn't deliver." So what do I get to get? 100 years later, I write a book called The Bluest.
Good answer.
To break down the barriers of racism and to engage the American public in conversation, Toni Morrison, the Pulitzer and Nobel Prize winner, raised the issues in her most challenging work, The Bluest Eye, which was published in 1970. It is sexually explicit, written in offensive language. The controversial topics of racism, incest, and the theme of child molestation had attempts to ban the book several times.
The very first book I wrote, called The Bluest Eye, was when I was not really thinking about publishing or reviewers or other readers. It was a book I wanted to read, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I began to write it, and it took forever because it had no real reason for being done except my own reading pleasure. It was like a long reading exercise that took 5 years.
Toni Morrison was born in Lorain, Ohio, United States, and she had read a lot of stories of Afro-American society in her childhood. She had studied in several universities and worked as an editor in a publishing house. Her work revolves around Afro-American history and their situation, revealing the most difficult circumstances and the dark side of humanity. The lynchings, the beatings, the hangings, the burnings in the past due to racism made the blacks terrified. A terror that makes knees tremble. A terror that takes all notions of mind. A terror that annihilates all notions of morality and dignity.
I come here today to talk about how I feel. And I feel like that we are treated differently than other people. And I don't like how we're treated. And just because of our color doesn't mean anything to me. I believe that we are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We shouldn't have to protest because y'all are treating us wrong. We do this because we need to have rights.
The Bluest Eye is her debut novel, which she started writing in 1962 as a story, and she finally published it as a novel in 1970. The novel is split into an untitled prelude and 4 larger units named after the seasons like autumn, winter, spring, and summer. There are 2 narrators. The first one is Claudia, as an adult who's recalling all the events when she was just 9 years of age. She is the younger daughter of McTeer family, the black family, and she gives her innocent perspective. The second one is an omniscient narrator who seems to know everything. When Claudia is not narrating, a third person narrator takes her place. The narrative style, even in third person, is of a great psychological intimacy. The third person narrator of the Bluest eye is also a passionate observer. He observes every little thing and gives insights into the thoughts of characters and occasionally interprets even in a very explicit manner. The sections which are narrated in the third person are all focused on some aspect of Pecola's life. The sections explore either a family member or a specific significant event. The first section is a version of a classic Dick and Jane story. There is a pretty house, mom, dad, Dick and Jane, a cat, a dog, and a friend for Jane to play. Now, this story appears 3 times. In the first version, the capitals and the punctuations are as normal. In the second version, they are missing. And in the third version, there is no space. So it all looks gibberish. Now, why the writer has given this story? She has to put into our mind the background, the white middle class society as presented, where white-skinned people with blonde hair and blue eyes are considered beautiful. Now, whatever she will say next would be so different, will be in contrast to this white family. There is no chronology in the novel. It is based on the narration of the 2 narrators. The story is of 2 black families, very different from each other. So the background is of 1939, when the Second World War was going on. The German Nazis had taken over the world. The first family is McTeer family. There is a mom, dad, and 2 sisters, a loving and caring family. The 2 sisters are Frida, the elder one, who is 10 years of age, and Claudia, who is 9 years of age. They are pretty confident, and the love, the affection, the protection is all revealed through the interaction and the dialogues between them. The other is a family of breedloves. Breedlove's home is sad, devoid of pleasant associations. There is no love, no care in the family, no warmth, the storehouse of only ugliness and poverty. So, this is the novel all about the teenage daughter of breedloves, Pecola, who's black. The society and the situations force her to feel ignored, ugly, and unwanted. The social constructions have shaped the belief of ugliness in them, as if the cloak of ugliness is given to them and the blacks seem to accept it. Pecola is ignored by her teachers, despised by her friends, classmates, and neglected by her parents. Therefore, she had prayed for blue eyes every night, believing that if her eyes turned blue and beautiful, she would be noticed by her friends and cared by her parents and society. Claudia, one of the narrator, talks about when she was small, she used to hate the sight of the white dolls with blonde hair and blue eyes. She used to dismantle them, break them into pieces just to find out what was there in them which made them so beautiful. Her frustration, her disagreement of the perception of beauty is revealed in her this kind of act when she used to break the dolls. Claudia is frustrated by the society that cherishes pink skin and blue eyes, and thus can never consider her a black girl to be truly beautiful. Her dissection of the dolls is strangely scientific. She tries to see how they are put together, what makes their voices work, and what they look like inside. The investigation of the dolls parallel to the investigative work done by the novel, which in its own words attempts to discover how social forces have combined to produce Pecola's tragedy. When Pecola goes to buy candies, the shopkeeper cannot see her. To see her would be to see her as a person, to encounter her subjectivity. To him, Pecola is nothing. Even she can see in his eyes that she meant nothing to him. Such moments reinforce Pecola's convictions that she is hideous. She feels invisible. Therefore, here one is dependent on others for feelings of self-worth, love, and even one's identity. Even the group of boys on the way would torment Pecola by chanting about her blackness and her father's supposedly bad habits. These are the insults of choice, even though the fathers of these boys had the same habits and they all came from black families. The MacTair family girls had the guts to stand up against the boys to rescue Pecola. Pecola had come to live with them because her father had burnt the house, making all of them homeless. What makes a person feel ugly and vulnerable? The societal forces play eminent role to make a person feel less than. All the billboards, advertisements, movies, and TV shows prefer white-skinned, blonde hair, beautiful blue-eyed models and actors. The perception of beauty is made by putting a standard in front of our eyes always. Every billboard, every movie, every glance, in a contrast, make the blacks feel more and more ugly. The descriptions from the general to the specific, focusing on a woman named Geraldine. She lives in Lorraine with her husband Louis and has a cat and a son named Junior. The cat is the object of her greatest affection, a clean and quiet animal that leaves no messes. Their family lives in a nice house next to the playground of Washington Irving School, which is also the school attended by Pecola and MacTairs. Geraldine has explained to her son that there is a difference between colored people and niggers, and that their family belongs to the first category, that is the colored people, who have standards of behavior more in line with white sensibilities. Or, as Geraldine would put in, colored people are clean and quiet, and niggers are dirty and loud. She had always encouraged her son to play with white children. Sitting alone on the school playground, Junior sees Pecola taking a shortcut through the yard. He gives her a hard time and then convinces her to come into his house, where he promises to show her kittens. Lured by the promise of a new kitten, Pecola follows him. Pecola is mystified by the size and beauty of the house, the clean furniture, the bits of decoration, and evidence of care. Junior shouts out to get her attention and throws his mother's large black cat into Pecola's face. The cat scratches her and Pecola begins to cry and tries to leave. But Junior pushes her down and runs to the other side of the door, keeping her in the room. The cat rubs up against Pecola's leg, and Pecola in turn is fascinated by the cat, which has a black face but blue eyes. She begins to pet the animal. Junior comes back in because he can no longer hear Pecola crying. He grabs the cat and swings it around. Pecola tries desperately to get Junior to let the animal go, but in the struggle, Junior lets go of the cat and the animal is flung against the window. The cat falls onto the radiator and is dead. Geraldine comes home and Junior blames the cat's death on Pecola. Geraldine looks into Pecola's eyes and feels revulsion and unease. She calls Pecola a little black bitch and tells her to get out of the house. The cat's face foreshadows Pecola's future tragedy. The black face with blue eyes, coupled with the creature's destruction. Once again, Pecola is the victim of other blacks' cruelty, indicating that hatred of blackness often comes from other blacks. Geraldine still does not see Pecola, the individual. Geraldine instead sees an abstracted representative of a whole social class, a social class she hates, and consequently she is merciless and cruel to Pecola. Pecola faces discrimination even by her own mother, Polly Breedlove. She works at a house of white, where she gives most of her attention and love, in contrast to her own house, which is miserable and in despair. The house of the white people for whom she works is spotless. The pie that should become a pleasant memory for Pecola will only be a pleasant memory for the little white girl. Polly exerts all her efforts in trying to make the house of the white folks feel like a home. Her own daughter doesn't matter to her at all. This little white girl is more important, as seen in her assurance that this little girl is advised not to trouble herself over the identity between black children. The saddest part of the novel is that Pecola is tormented by her own father. She is physically abused, raped by him, and her mother doesn't give protection. Instead, she beats her to death. The gossip of her pregnancy is all around, and the two girls pray for the safe delivery by expecting the blooming of marigold flowers which they have sowed, and believed that if the flowers bloom, the baby will be born alive. But to their dismay, the plants wilt, no flowers, and the baby is stillborn. All this represents hostile conditions that have conspired against Pecola. Her baby, like the seeds in the backyard, dies before it has a chance to live. The narrator switching back to the past tense, the narrative describes three prostitutes who live in the apartment above the Breedlove storefront. China, Mari, and Poland are three black prostitutes who let Pecola visit them and run errands for them. All three are past their prime and hate men with a vengeance. They are crass and unapologetic survivors despised by the community at large. They in turn despise the community right back. These three votes round out Pecola's family. They are not cruel to her, but they don't fuss over her or provide an adequate substitute for the family life Pecola is missing. Their names bring World War II back to the reader's consciousness. Poland and China are both countries which in 1939 are occupied or being invaded by fascist armies. Black women are instrumental in holding families together, in enduring the worst part of prejudice, and in running both their own households and the households of white employers. But they are in many ways society's most vulnerable members. There is a connection between these three outcasts and Pecola, and a reason why they do not despise her. Between their fallen status and Pecola's belief in her own ugliness, there is some common ground. Pecola has inherited a legacy of shame, a self-loathing. She is the end of line after losing her baby, and then she loses her mind also. She possibly inherited her insanity from her parents. She invents a new friend and wonders why can't everyone notice her? And also Pecola's newly achieved blue eyes. The friend is from her split personality, manufactured in madness. Her friend assures her all the time that Pecola has the bluest eye. Pecola talks to the imaginary friend about the pains, humiliation, social forces, and gets a vent through sharing to a friend, although imaginary.
That they were inferior to me, morally. I always thought that. And my parents always thought that.
You said your father was racist because he always felt like he was
superior. That's right. He always felt superior. And that was a form, of defensive racism. But if the racist white person, I don't mean the person who is examining his consciousness and so on, doesn't understand that he or she is also a race, it's also constructed, it's also made, and it also has some kind of serviceability. But when you take it away, I take your race away. And there you are, all strung out. And all you got is your little self. And what is that? What are you without racism? Are you any good? Are you still strong? You still smart? You still like yourself? I mean, these are the questions. It's part of it is, yes, the victim, how terrible it has been for black people. I'm not a victim. I refuse to be one.